Hello, good morning, everyone. We'll give it about a couple more minutes, maybe 2 minutes for some people to come into the Zoom and we'll get started. People will be slowly joining us, but I'll go ahead and start us off. Good morning, everyone. I'm on the West Coast time, so we're a bit early over here, 7 a.m. And welcome to our IJA webinar training, Kusapi Trauma-Informed Journalism Training, led by your syilx sisters, Kelsie and Lauren Marchand. The training has been, sorry, my toddler's in the background. He's gonna get ready for school soon. The training has been offered at the annual Indigenous Media Conference for the past 2 years. And due to the popularity of the program, we decided to have the training in a webinar format. The training session equips participants with essential tools and skills for handling sensitive stories with care and respect. The training will delve into immersive storytelling, syilx protocols for supporting the grieving, and the sacredness of sharing someone's story, their medicine. Part of IJA's mission is to serve and empower Indigenous journalists through programs and actions designed to enrich journalism and promote Indigenous culture. Through this webinar, IJA would like to provide a space for members to learn and utilize skills to practice self-care, to share Indigenous community stories, and strengthen Indigenous journalists. Last note, we will be recording this training and we plan to share it on IJA's YouTube channel. But with that being said, I'll hand it off to our sisters.
Why, thank you so much for the introduction. We're so happy to be here. This is always such an honor to get to work with the IJA in any type of way. We have so much respect for the association and what it provides for our people. Me and Lauren are here today to present. We all say we have to tell everyone we're actually sisters because we feel like we don't look alike. Let's tell everyone we're real sisters. And we'll get into why we call ourselves your soul sisters, because it's aside from also being related. But yeah, I am a journalist. In my background is journalism. I come to this with a lot of knowledge of what it is like to be reporting on the front lines, especially in situations where there's high levels of working with people's trauma and coming into kinship with it. I created this training, the bare bones of what the training has become. I created it during the uncovering of our 215 relatives in in-kum-up-ah-lux. That's where Lauren and I, our family, all of our family on both our parents' sides went to that school, and have a lot of stories of what it was like to survive that school. And so it hit really close to home, watching our family grieve so deeply and watching all of it unfold in the media in a way that was really irresponsible. At the time, I was the cultural editor and senior auntie of Indigenous. And so I decided to write, I thought it was going to be a guide at first. But as I was writing, especially like as Indian people, we're very oral in our storytelling. So I was like, oh, maybe it needs to be just like a workshop of some sort, just something where people can log on and listen to, some of the stories that can help guide them. So then we put together this training, and we put out a poster on the Friday, and we were stoked if we would got 30 people. Like, that was our goal at the time. We were like, let's get 30 people to sign up. It would be so good. And then, yeah, we had over 400 journalists sign up for it. And it was just an amazing outpouring of support and people really resonating with the teachings, resonating with this form of storytelling, of gentle teachings, because that's how our people always have done things. Very, we deliver our teachings very gently. And so we've been using this form of storytelling to share about Um, we today, in the terms that we use, we call it trauma informed. But for our people, it's just coming into kinship with someone from where they're at in their own ceremony in life. And so in creating this, it's grown and grown and grown. And we've trained over probably 5,000 people now, because last year it was 4,000, but we do these quite often. So it's just been taking on a life form of its own. And we always share that when you find your gift and your purpose in life, you don't have to do any advertising because you're working in alignment with your creation, with your purpose of being here. And you'll always be taken care of when you do that. And so we're really grateful to be here and to be able to use our voices in any kind of way to support folks who are telling our stories, to support Indigenous people who feel harmed by our stories sometimes, who have to, feel the weight of carrying our stories. And so, yeah, so that's what we're here to bring today. I'll let Lauren introduce sort of herself and what she does.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren Marchand, and I do more of I actually have brought into our training more of like the science aspect of it, because a lot of our protocols are for the nation. And so in order for people to be able to understand and further explore, we use quantum physics specifically because that's the closest in Western science that has finally kind of caught up to us and our science. And so we were able to utilize that as a teaching tool. And then just a couple of sides for the folks that are joining now, you will see our kids in the background. They're going to be kind of coming in and out. It's 7 in the morning right now, so they're just heading off to school. And I'm also sitting right beside Kelsie, so I apologize if it sounds a little bit quiet. I'm usually a quiet talker, but I'm trying to yell because we have to share a speaker and a mic.
Yeah, we probably should have thought of this differently. I'm so loud. Yeah, so welcome to our training. We'll start to jump in now to our self-location. So we're going to discuss a little bit more about why self-location is important in this next portion of the training, but just we'll give you an example of what it looks like by sharing ours. And so all of these women here that you see on the screen are all of our grandmothers. So this is our grandmother, Teresa Adamson McLean, our great-great-grandmother, rather. This is our great-grandmother, Christine Edwards, and our grandmother, Barbara Oppenheimer, and that's our mom right there. This is our paternal side. This is our great-grandmother and our great-great-grandmother, Mildred and Julia, and that's our dad. And this is Chief Speetlum, and Chief Speetlum is the medicine of the heart, is the energy of the heart. And she's the one who, as one of our food chiefs, she's one of our sort of brings guiding values around nurturing and caretaking people and kinships. When you go to gather Chief Speetlum, it's like a very beautiful process, because when you pull Speetlum out of the ground, it looks like a little human. It looks exactly like this, like a little human coming out of the ground. And then you have to strip it right away so that it's the easiest time to strip it versus doing it later when it's dried. And it's so cute because we always say it looks like it's wearing pants. And then you open up the Speetlum, and in the Speetlum is a little heart, and it's a red heart. And the only way to transplant the Speetlum is by removing the heart and replanting it, which is our regenerative way of gathering it. Which tells us, as long as there's Speetlum here, there's people who are praying for us, because you say a prayer every time you plant its heart. And for Speetlum to have lasted this long, it meant that we had people carrying our teachings and these gathering practices and these prayers for that long. And so that's the medicine of Speetlum. And it's the caretaker of the heart, the caretaker of the people and all the generations and all the kinships that are nurtured by it. So whenever we have ceremony, Speetlum is necessary. We have to have Speetlum at all of our ceremonies. And so we always make sure that when we're gathering every year that we put away a portion for ceremony. And so that's the medicine we bring into this, this is our teachings of bringing our heart into the future by giving it to you all, and sort of our prayer for everybody. and how you come into the work that you're doing. The work that we're sharing today is all based from here in our homelands, which is syilx homelands, colonially known as the Okanagan in Vernon, BC. So we're north of probably most of you. And yeah, so we'll jump into our protocols. So this is our protocols of coming together today, of being with each other. So staying in your awareness, just you know, you can be comfortable however you need to be. We're aware it's a different time for everybody right now across the board, so be comfortable. As you can see, we're totally comfortable. We're like both wearing like sweats with our coffee. So be comfortable. We want you to learn in the best way that you learn. It's not for us to tell you how to do that. But stay in your awareness, keep sort of an open heart and an open mind to what we're sharing today, because there will be a lot of learning new things and unlearning old things. And I'll pass it to Lauren for the next. Have compassion.
Okay. And then having compassion for yourself and for others. So like kind of as we move through all the information, there's going to be times where you might have had some reflections on things that maybe you witnessed or things that you have done without the intentions of creating harm. And as we kind of learn, we start to know better, and then we do better. So having compassion for yourself, and honestly just understanding that you don't know until you know a lot of the information that's about to happen. And then again, just once you move forward in life, just once you know better, you do better. And that's like one of a really big teaching that we have in our homelands.
And then do not weaponize the knowledge that you gain. This is a lot for when we're working in really heavily colonial spaces, particularly like government spaces. We don't want anyone to take our teachings and then infer superiority because they have this knowledge and maybe an Indigenous person doesn't. We do actually see that quite often, where people will take them and be like, oh, well, I know more about being Native than you do. And like, you know, when our people are on such a journey of self, self-discovery and reclaiming what that looks like. And so we just ask folks that these are for your personal practice. We invite you to share what we're teaching today. We invite you to share it out with people who you know will need it, and to use it to inform you and to empower you. But yeah, really hold it close for personal practice for you. We don't share these teachings lightly. We share them with the most respect for our nation, and the protocols that are put in place to protect these teachings. And so we share it with a lot of love and a lot of trust, that we're nurturing the future by sharing some of the things we're sharing today. So yeah, that we'll leave you with that. And then Lauren will explain the next.
And then taking what resonates with you and leaving what doesn't. So there might be some things that you find that you can apply to your practices now. There may be things that you find later on that apply more, and there might be some that you may not even have been applying in this lifetime. It's really just understanding that some of these things are going to speak to you more than others, and that's totally fine.
And then be prepared to be uncomfortable through the process. Again, there's just a lot of discomfort when it comes to learning and unlearning. We're going to share with you why it's not helpful to be learning from a place of shame. So if you feel like this unlearning process is really heavy on your heart, and maybe you might feel some shame coming up, we ask you to be a witness to the shame, but let it go. Don't let it take over your mind. Don't let it, we'll explain Coyote, but Coyote will take that and he'll run off with your mind. And we use Coyote a lot through everything we do in life. So, Coyote is our, in all of our stories, he's our trickster, much like he is in other homelands. He's our trickster, our teacher, and our transformer. And so he will often represent our human ego. That's how he's sort of discussed within our stories, is he's like this inflated sense of a human ego, to make it very obvious to us when we're acting out in Coyote, not ourselves, not our spirit self. And so, yes, Coyote will take if he senses that we have any shame, he loves that. And he will take your mind and he will take off with it and tell it all sorts of stories and lies that aren't true. So we ask people just to sit in their awareness and discipline their inner Coyote, to be able to be here with us. So we'll jump into our first section here. We will talk a lot about our stories, our Indigenous land connections, and our responsibilities, and then we'll discuss a little bit of prophecy and some storytelling protocols that we have. I also want to mention, I thank you so much. I got a message in the chat, but I know you can't see Lauren here, but she's on the Zoom under Lauren Marchand. So when she's talking, I don't know if you want to look for her, but it might be helpful. I would pin her, but then she's the only one pinned, and I know she would be uncomfortable with that. So we'll jump in. So we'll discuss this story. It's called Our Scale of Responsibility. And we really love this story. This is our grandmother's art, and we helped her create this series when we were kids. Our grandmother, Barbara Pearl Marchand, is an amazing mixed media artist who does all her art from the land. She does the stories of our land and our teachings, and then she goes out onto the land and gathers all the materials she needs to tell the story of our land. So it's such an embodied process that we got to take part of as children. We were raised partially by her here in her art studio. This is her old home that I'm really grateful to live in now and call home for myself. And we really just love this story. So all the paints that you see here that she created this art piece with are all from our land. We went to go gather all these paints. Every summer we'd help her gather up all the materials needed to make her art. And she would share with us our chap-teek stories. Our chap-teek is our oral storytelling laws here in our homelands. They are the ones that tell us our values as people and our laws of how we are to be. Our coyote stories are a bit different. Our kasapi stories are a bit different. Kasapi stories are long time ago stories. That's what kasapi means, and that's why we named our training that, because it means a long time ago. And when you hear someone start a story that's before human time, they say kasapi. I think it's very animated, and it's always, even if you don't understand the language, you understand through their movement and through how they embody the story. Our people, much like many other Indigenous people across the world, are phenomenal storytellers. And so, you know, a lot of our upbringing was rooted in storytelling. And so this story that outlines our responsibility to you all today, we come here with accountability for our people, is laid out by this story, and it's called Little Brother. And if you can look here, these are the older sisters in the story, the older siblings. And they all have their arms open to Coyote, Little Brother. And Little Brother is actually the depiction of white people coming here. That was our first prophecy story back then, before the white people came, or settler people. And so when they had come over, they said, it's going to be a little brother to you. They're going to look like you, but they're going to be, well, much fairer in skin. They explained the actual visuals. They said, what was it? Hair like hay fields or hair like straw fields, and really pale eyes. And so they said that they're going to come here and they're going to look different, but they're going to be a little brother to you. They're not going to understand the world the way you understand the world, because they're younger. And so you must teach them how to love this land as we love this land. You are their big sister, you are their big brother, and you are to teach them to love the land as we do, to honor it and to take care of it, and learn how to be on the land. And that comes with a lot of many things. When we think about our love for our siblings, we think about that they're irritating sometimes. And sometimes you're just like, you are not ready for this conversation. And you get to walk away from it. But at the end of the day, you go to bed knowing that you still love them, you have care for them, you don't want to see harm come to them, that tomorrow you got to get up and you got to love them anyways. And wait. Sometimes it means just waiting. And sometimes it's not even in our lifetime that little brother is ready for a conversation. But sometimes little brother matures quickly, or sometimes, little brother gets more involved in our community, and we have to teach certain ways, and maybe we feel safer teaching some of the ways. And so it all comes with this great responsibility. And that's what outlines our scale of responsibility. And the word scale of means that our DNA is the same DNA of the land, that we were pulled from the earth to create our being. We were pulled from our earth, which means that our blood matches the blood of the land. And so we use that term syilx to acknowledge anyone who's born from their land, any Indigenous person. And it means the word Indigenous, or for us up here, it means the word Indian. And so when we talk about what our responsibility is to settler people, this is the story that we reflect on, that even when conversations are hard, sometimes it means they're not ready for the conversation. Sometimes it means that we love anyways. And so it comes with all of these different protocols. And that's why we call our business Your Soul Sisters, is because we say after you take our training, you'll forever be our sibling. Whether it's you're our sister, our brother, or you're our little brother, you always can reach out to us and ask us to help support you through whatever it is, because the learning doesn't end here. We're going to share with you sort of the framework and the understanding of everything, but that you know, there will be applicable learning in the future where maybe you're working on your next story and you're like, I don't know how to do this. Like in theory, it sounds beautiful, but how do I do it in practice? Please email us. Like, we have had a lot of folks from IJA trainings in the past email us and ask for support through stories, and we've done it in a heartbeat because we really love and care for our people, and we really love and care for all humans that need to feel okay telling a story. So that's our scale of responsibility. We'll talk now about our silk rope teachings. And syilx is the name of our nation. I'll let Lauren explain this.
So these are our silk rope teachings. So the root word yoke is the taking of many strands and twisting to make one rope, a command for all strands of life to continuously bind and unify with the rest. And so when we kind of look at the rope, we think of each individual fiber within this rope as the individual journey. So each fiber represents the individual on their own soul's journey. And then as we kind of start to intertwine together and come together, we start to form the collective consciousness. So as we move into the collective awareness of one another, the truth is not meant to divide anyone, but to bring us into a space of unified interconnection. And then once the rope starts to build itself, with everybody coming together, we start to find ourselves in the sense of co-creation. So no one benefits from the absence of the other, and strength can only be co-created through the spiraling together of the many individual journeys. And I always like to use the analogy of when you think of a rope, if you have it outside, let's say it's holding something up that's really important. For some reason, I always pictured like the engines hanging up. I don't know why, but usually it's when I know I'm pulling up to like my res mechanic. And when you have them hanging up, and you look at the integrity of the rope, if you were to leave it out in the elements, you start to notice that things start to, the fibers start to weaken and become brittle. Under the sun, under the wind and everything, it just starts to become to weaken, and the integrity of the rope altogether starts to weaken. And when we kind of look at it in that sense, and we think of ourselves as those individual fibers, if we're not taking care of ourselves, then the fiber starts to weaken. And collectively, if we look at ourselves in a sense of co-creation, those that are still holding on are having to take on the load of the fibers that are weakening, and have possibly have even broken. So we really find our place within this rope. Every single fiber that's within it creates that integrity. It helps build upon each other. It supports each other. And you really start to notice the absence of a fiber that's next to you, because that means that that weight is now falling onto you. So it's really important to be taking care of ourselves and honoring each other, and honoring the space that that other fiber or that other person is bringing to the collective co-creation. And then we look at the energy exchange and living in reciprocity. So each of us is born in harmony with the land through a vibration. Western science knows these vibrations as a frequency. So our voice emits a frequency, and the energy of the universe recognizes those frequencies. When we talk about energy exchange, we mean that you are trading frequencies and their vibrations. We do this through each footstep on the land, each thought we have, each word we say out loud on the land, and so much more. How we decide to engage with the place we are in is our offering. So we look at the universal energy, and each human, land, place, plant, animals, and elements carry life force. This life force is known in Instruction, which is our language, as the Tumuk. And the Tumuk is impacted by universal energies such as galaxies, planets, stars, and the moon. One of the things all these energies do is align us in a more unified way. So the importance of the now, as we look at the prophecies held by Indigenous nations all over the globe, we all know that we are living in times that require unity. Humanity has an important role in the perpetuation of the natural processes of the world. And a quote from Nikola Tesla, with Albert Einstein also sharing the exact same sentiments, is, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And when we kind of look at that through the lens of that, we move into the quantum aspect. And if we were to look at the classical atom, which is what I learned in high school, I remember making like the models out of clay and pipe cleaners and little styrofoam balls. The classical atom is represented by the atom's material makeup. So just what we as humans can perceive with the naked eye, of course, at a very microscopic level. And then there's the quantum version of the atom, which is where science is starting to move into and understand the world in a very different way. And the quantum version of the atom is 99.99999% energy, and it's only 0.00001% matter. So it's just about nothing materially. So if you were to look at whatever's sitting in front of you right now, whether that be like a water bottle or a pen, your mouse, or even your computer itself, you're actually, as a human, we're only able to perceive 0.00001% what is actually sitting in front of us. So everything around us, including ourselves, is all energy. And how it really makes you understand the difference between, like, when we look at the science even of sound, of light, and how energy plays in those, and how vibrations and frequencies play within those aspects. It really adds to the power of our words, it adds to the power of our thoughts. How we interact with our environment, how our environment interacts with us.
And often too, we always talk about how ceremony is sort of how we would depict, or how we could explain in the most respectful way of our protocols, that quantum energy. That our people, when we go into ceremony, we're going into ceremony with the 99.999% that we can't see. And that our power, especially as Syilx people, as Indigenous people, is with that energy. It understands us. That's why it's so important that place-based people tell place-based stories, because you're holding all the energy of those stories. You actually can go ceremony for those stories in a good way on the land that they belong to, coming into kinship with it in a different type of way, which we'll discuss more.
So the not so randomness of the universe. So we see patterns repeated all over from the universe, from something as small as your brain cells to the universal cosmic web, with galaxies interwoven, one a reflection of the other, even down to the DNA strands that resemble nebulas in outer space. This all occurs because the universe is a fractal. A fractal is a geometric pattern that occurs again and again at different scales and sizes. So that means that the universe is self-similar across all scales, from the macro to the micro level. And when we kind of look at our interactions and our reciprocity that exists with the land itself, we look at some kind of common reflection would be like the trees. And if you were to flip the trees look like lungs. And so the trees are breathing in CO2 and exhaling oxygen, whereas we as humans are breathing in oxygen and exhaling CO2. So we're a direct benefit and a direct reflection of each other. And that really is that reciprocity that we as humans and the land around us and our environment around us is similar. And I always just like to say the universe, or Kulanchutin, all creation is something that works smarter and not harder. So it has those senses of patterns and shapes that kind of recreate itself over and over again. And when we look at something like the, sorry, kids are all starting to wake up now. When we look at the patterns that exist within the universe, something like the eagle flying in a spiral, things like the Milky Way in that spiral shape. And you start to look at where spirals exist all over. And the same thing goes with those hard edges that come from minerals. And there's all these different shapes that are all over the place when we really start to analyze and look at, at how everything is working together.
Sorry, the kids' bedrooms are right behind us, so it's yeah, it's distracting.
So then we look into the levels of consciousness. So this is an art piece that I had created, and it's kind of showing us through our lives and our soul's journey. So we're kind of entering through the bottom, and you'll notice that on every single level, there's somebody sitting, there's somebody reaching, and there's somebody reaching down. And the person that you're going to be in this position at every stage of your life, and every single place that you find yourself, whether it's you're sitting kind of more stagnant in reflection in this moment right now, that is not only okay, but it's also encouraged, because there are those times that we need to sit with things, sit with in where we are, and really understand that that place is serving us. And then there's going to be times where we need someone to support us. We need to reach up and understand that people have kind of been pathfinders in this direction, where they kind of have already walked this path, and they can help support us in navigating it. And then there's going to be times where we're reaching down and we're helping people up. So we all kind of have these different positions in our life, and it's going to show this. We kind of look back at all these phases that we've all lived, all these many versions of ourselves that have existed in different times, and how many people have supported us, how many people we have supported, how many times we sat there, we're like, you know what, this is a comfortable place to be in right now. I have something to learn from reflecting in this moment. And so this is just like, I also wanted to have this created in not a pyramid, but upside down pyramid, essentially, because I wanted it to look expansive. It's about expanding. It's not about reaching a point. So we're all constantly learning and growing, and that is literally the most amazing thing about being human.
And again, just to point out, the rest is really important. It's part of our growth, those periods of rest. And Lauren and I, whenever we might have a month where we haven't done any trainings, we're just like, oh my gosh, this is just our month of rest. And we just take it for what it is. It's so important to honor those times and to be comfortable resting, especially as Indigenous people, because I know we've been taught, to work, which is part of our lifestyle, right? That is part. And I always say, like, let's not think of self-care as being like bubble baths and yoga retreats all the time. Like it sometimes self-care is tanning a hide, which is really hard work, right? But it uses all of our muscles, and it ties us closer to our people. Anything that brings you to a place where you can sort of just be with your body is self-care. So it doesn't have to look the same as anyone else's. Your self-care can look different. It will look different, but to honor that space, because that's where you're going to really learn and you're going to let loose. Lauren and I have been doing a lot of art of our own lately, which is really nice. I had my coyote painting around here somewhere. And it just brings me so much joy. I've been painted since I was a kid. And I just started painting again because one of my sort of goals this year is to get more hobbies so that I'm not just like working and then mindlessly scrolling and doom scrolling and doing nothing to take care of myself. So art has always been something so close to me when it comes to painting. And so I've been really creating art that's humorous for me, and it's just been a lot of fun. It's been really interesting.
And then
sorry, I'm just gonna zoom out. There we go.
And then we look at the map of consciousness. So this is done by Dr. David Hawkins, and it was done through muscle testing. And so when we kind of look at the lower levels, the lowest on the scale is shame, and then the highest in the scale is enlightenment. And so when we look at the impacts of residential schools, as Kelsie had mentioned earlier, when we're in ceremony, we're very much working within the vibrations and the things that you don't see. And we kind of use the physical manifestations of what we do see. For example, like sage and all of our medicines is the physical manifestation of the energy that we're trying to meet. And when we look at the impacts of working within these energies, that was where we kind of knew our identity to be. That's how we found connection. That's where we felt that we were at home. And we do all of our ceremonies through love. We do all of our ceremonies through joy. We always find it very important to have joy in our life. As Kelsey was just mentioning, that's why we have kind of moved in, me and Kelsey both have moved into art for ourselves. Like I do it professionally, so I always do a lot of collaborative work. And I'm finding so much joy in just doing what I feel makes me happy, because it's a very, very different aspect of doing art when it's not done for your business. And so having that joy is such a high vibration. And it kind of is like Kelsey mentions it sometimes. It's like when you watch Monsters Inc. and how, you know, the fear was what provided everybody energy. But then when we brought in the children's laughter, that's actually what like made so much energy that was able to support them. And it was done through joy. It's kind of that, it's like an example of it. And when residential schools came in and when colonialism really started to impact the Indigenous peoples and disrupt our lives, it was done through shame. Shame of our identity, shame of our ceremonies. Anytime we spoke our language, there was shame brought upon it. And if you kind of think of Indigenous people who really focused on that love and joy and peace done through ceremony, and we considered our entire lives ceremony, and then all of a sudden somebody came and brought shame to it, you see how low it drops. And there are a lot of Indigenous people today, again, they're existing in the space that they need to right now. They're in their own journey, and it's going to look different than everybody here. They're going to be in places of guilt, possibly of things that have happened in their life or harm that they may have inflicted themselves. They're going to be places of fear. And I remember kind of having everything to do with Indigenous people being very hush-hush when I was younger. The only really big things I saw of it was just within our home communities. And then this big movement came out. I remember like going to powwows and seeing on the hats, there was always Native Pride. And that was like this big movement. And when you kind of think about it, that is the pride right there. That was kind of where we started to embrace our identities and understand that we don't need to remain hidden. And the only reason we were hidden was for survival. It wasn't for the sake that we were necessarily ashamed of ourselves. Even though that's what residential schools tried to inflict upon us, it was more so that we needed to preserve those parts of ourselves at a soul level.
Oh my gosh, just 1 second. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, we're just managing to get 3 kids at the door, so with as little distraction as possible. But just to add to a lot of the what Lauren just shared, when we do talk about bringing joy into our ceremonies, you'll see in all of our ceremonies, aside from our death ceremonies, that there's children there, and we bring children in for very specific reason, and it's to bring the joy. It's to remind us why we're there. It's to pray for them, and they bring in that higher level vibration. So as Lauren again mentioned, before colonizers came, we were always operating in that higher level. That's why we were able to talk to animal people. That's why we were able to interact with that 99.99% was because of that, because the vibration of our existence was much higher. And so when we think of the level of shame, we really believe that colonizers knew exactly what they were doing by bringing shame to us and shame to our ways. They knew that they were taking away our ability to caretake our land through prayers. They were putting shame on all of these things that were silencing us. And it reminds me of a teaching we got from one of our elders who says, when you try to speak up for your people or you try to say something that you know to be right, and you feel a big lump in your throat, that it's the colonizer putting their boot on your throat. It's that energy that's doing that. And so that's, part of that shame. It still lives in our bodies. but we have to be more disciplined now to bring ourselves to a higher level, and to be able to work in more of that unity energy. There was something else I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, when we did this training with a theater company, and the theater company had the sound techs that were all there. And when the sound techs were looking at all the vibrations and the frequencies, one of the fellows there spoke up and said, he was said that level of frequency for shame would shatter glass. And he said, it's amazing to see what that would do to our bodies and how our body holds that energy. If it would shatter glass, what does that do to our bodies? And as we know, our people, we face a lot more of the health issues and things like that because they try to weaken it, right? And so we have to be really strong in who we are and our identities. But we really wanted to share that, and I know a lot of people might wonder why we share this, but it will make sense. Oh, and this always happens.
So who is our kin? Everything has consciousness, awareness, right from the pebble you skip across the lake to the loved one you share your time with. So we have all moved through the layers of existence. We are said to have been something from a rock to our kin, the animal people, before our experience as a human. And Earth is a sacred community, a community in which humans are only one dimension. So if you kind of look at the bottom tier there, you'll see all 4 elements. And so it's been said that we have been all these things, and also we still are these things. And there was lessons that we pulled from every part of that. And that came from like if we were to see ourselves in the place of being a rock, that teaches us how to be grounded. That teaches us how to be patient, because you have to be very patient to be a rock. If you imagine sitting on a cliffside, you're going to be there for like millions of years. So the patience that you would learn from that is beyond me, especially as someone who can get very impatient at times. And that is that reminder to ground yourself. And that is why that is so important. We see something like fire, which can be seen as destructive, but it's also a really big sign of rebirth. When we had the fires come through our community, I looked the following spring, and it was actually amazing to see all this greenery coming back, even though there was so much change that had happened within this time. And it brought a lot of grief from the land itself, because everything looked different. Everything kind of responded differently than it had before the fires had come in. But at the same time, you start to look at the things that are growing now, and how that actually has been in benefit of. And you think of your time as water, something that's seen as so gentle, but can also be really, really dangerous. And it can cut through rock, but it does it slowly and through time. We look at our time through being a plant. Those types of lessons could have been something like our life, like life being short. They have a very short time span, but everything around them is beauty. They need certain aspects to survive and to grow in. And then we see our time as when we were the animal people. And we look at our brother bear, and there's actually some young ladies in our community who are creating something called a bear scat garden. And so after the fires had come through, they started collecting bear scat. And that bear scat, they kind of pulled apart, and there's hundreds of seeds within one single bear scat. And the bears perfectly propagate the seeds. And so as soon as they poop, it ends up becoming planted. And all these plants, and they're all natural plants because that's what skin geese eat. There are all these natural plants that are all around the homelands from the bears themselves. And so what these young ladies did is they collected it, they planted the seeds. And what they're doing is they're going up to these burn areas, and they're planting all of these plants that came from Skimheast. And it kind of became this reciprocal relationship on rebuilding what the fires had taken. And it's just like such a beautiful way of looking at how how we can be reciprocal in with the animal people, and how closely we still do work with them. And that was kind of the tier before we came into our time as a human, where we encompass all of this. and learning at a very different level, but we still are only one dimension of this entire community.
Okay, and yeah. Okay, sure. So this is the portion that we talk about self-location, where we shared in the beginning sort of the reason of why we're here today, the energy that we bring to you, and why we show up the way that we do. And it's part of our scale of intelligence, so it's part of our knowledge that lives on the land. And we always like to remind people that Dr. Jeanette Armstrong puts it in such a beautiful way that we should start talking about our ways as a science. Start saying, like, you know, this, it's syilx science when we teach this, or it's, you know, it's the name of your nation and people that hold the knowledge, that it's not just their science, but, you know, you can talk about it in all these different types of ways because it's been proven over time. It's been heavily researched and proven over and over and over. And so we like to always like share that this is part of our intelligence. So this is our 4 food chiefs, and the 4 food chief system embodies our scale of Indigenous way of life, balancing diverse energies to expand our knowledge and enhance co-creation. So regardless of gender or identity, anyone can embrace a role identified by one of our 4 food chiefs, based on their knowledge, experiences, teachings, and strengths. This approach ensures that everyone feels seen, heard, and valued, recognizing that each person has a purpose and is important. And this is our in-kum-up-ah-lux, how we explain it. So the in-kum-up-ah-lux was the first great meeting that our people had of the 4 food chiefs and how the 4 food chief system came to be. And so, sorry. If we look at all 4 of them, we have Chief Skimheast. He's our group that represents the elders and bear. And then we have Chief Speetlam, the group that represents the mothers and the heart. And then we have Chief syilx. She represents the youth and abundance and growing. And then we have Chief chap-teek, who represents action and the fathers. And so we always like to say, like, this is what hosts the energy, and it's important for us to share this in its entirety, but that not to place yourself in it just because you're a mother, or just because you're a father, or just because you're an elder, or just because you're a youth. You can be anything. We've had lots of our youth sit with Chief Skimheast. Our father sits with Chief Speetlam, the mothers group. He's very, like, naturally very nurturing, and he has such a big heart that helps us to understand things. And so don't try to place yourself in that, but we do share that that's how it's explained. So we don't want to minimize how it's explained. And so each one of these in a in-kum-up-ah-lux meeting, each one of these data points here is a life, is a person's story. And so when you're coming to your first meeting, you come to solve a central problem. And that central problem, or it's not always a problem, it could be an issue, it could be something that needs to see resolved, is always like a central question of it. You come as one of the 4 food chiefs. You come and sit as one of them. Because that's your strength. You only speak to any issue out of your strength and out of your lived experience and out of your own knowing. You never speak from a place of nowhere. That's one of our greatest teachings, is we don't speak from a place of nowhere. We only speak from a place of knowing, which is very conflicting when we think about journalism. When we think that, you know, or when we hear that there's so much power in not knowing anything about the people, not knowing anything, you know, that is what has served journalism for so long, and harmful media practices, was being completely disconnected from something. Whereas for our people to be completely connected and to find your place in the story is what strengthens it, is what makes it beautiful, and what makes it the least harmful, which is why we shared this system with people, knowing that we don't have to be everything. We just bring our strength to what we're talking about. And so in the first big meeting, there's a big story that comes with it called the 4 food chief story. And what happens is Quillanchutin, which is creation, but we don't like to talk about creation as a creator, as like a sort of like a symbolism of like a central god, because we believe this creation is the universe experiencing itself over and over and over. So that's like the definition of it. So when creation said, okay, the people, or the human beings are coming, the people to be is what they called them, the people to be are coming. All of you animal people need to come together and figure out how you're going to feed them and clothe them and take care of them, because they're going to be very young in mind. They're going to be very fragile. They're not going to know how to survive. They're going to be very pitiful. And you animal people need to sort of come together and figure out how we're going to take care of them. It's our responsibility. And so Chief Skimhees, which is the oldest of the animal people, said, okay, I'll give up my life and I'll lay my life down so that the people to be will have all the four-legged to feed them and nourish them. And then Chief Speetlam said, okay, I will lay my life down so that they can have everything, all the roots that grow underground, all of the foods that grow underground, that will help support their well-being and the medicine for them. And so she had agreed to that. And then Chief Syilx said, okay, I'll lay my life down so that the people to be can have all of the things that grow above the ground, anything, you know, all the plants and what we call plant parents. And the reason that we call it, just as a side, the reason that we call them plant parents is because of all of the plants that it took to bring us here. You think of like your great grandmothers who nourished themselves from the land. It's part of your DNA now, and so they're your plant parents. They're part of the things that actually make up your body. And then Chief chap-teek said, okay, I'll lay my life down so that they can have anything that swims in the water, anything within the water, they can have. And so Chief Skimhees said, okay, I'll instead of like everyone having to lay their life down, I'll lay my life down and make this prayer complete. And once one of you will have a song that will bring me back to life, but all of your songs will be important in bringing me back to life. So everyone sang their songs, and nothing, he wasn't coming back to life. And in the background was little fly flying around and saying like, I want to sing, I want to sing. And they're like, oh, shoot, fly, you're too small and you're too insignificant. Your voice isn't loud enough, and you just won't make a difference in this, like, shoo. And so they all sang their songs over and over and over, and bear was not coming back to life. And so they started to really worry, and they got annoyed because Fly just wouldn't be quiet. And so they said, okay, fine, Fly, sing your song. So Fly went and sat on Skimhees' ear, on Bear's ear, and started singing her song. And that song now is our gratitude song. But that song is what brought him back to life. And so that story has so many teachings, that the smallest voice is the most important in any room. That's one of our guiding teachings, and that we always have to listen to that smallest voice, because they might have the key to bring something back to life. They might have a very important teaching or purpose or role that will bring something to life that has been sleeping, or maybe just needs that. It needs to be out in the world. And so one of the special roles of Chief Speetlam is to make sure that Fly is thought of, because there's so many kinships to think about. And so being the keeper of kinships, she's the one who will often look to Fly, or look for Fly. And so when we're thinking of storytelling and we're thinking of journalism, we should be asking ourselves for every story, what voice is missing? Whose voice might be taken away because we think we know more than Fly, right? Then Fly can have to bring something back. And so when we go to an in-kum-up-ah-lux meeting in our nation, and this is called, we choose one of the 4 food chiefs to sit within. And we choose based on our lived experience, and we choose based on the knowledge that we carry, and what is our strength. And so we had an in-kum-up-ah-lux where the central question was, how do we bring back culture and language to our community? And so for me, I chose to sit with Chief Speetlam, the keeper of the kinships and hearts, the heart of the people, because I really resonate with that energy, with being a mother, with being a caretaker of people. But for me, it's like caretaking of people on a collective level versus like individual. But yeah, a caretaker of a collective. And so I was like, okay, well, I naturally resonate with that. So that's where I chose to sit. Lauren sat with Skimhees. Do you want to share why?
Just because with Skimhees being the keeper of old ways, I find myself a lot of times coming from that aspect of things, and understanding that there's a sense of honoring what we have come from in order to see where we're going to go after, which is more of a Chief Syilx But I also say with Chief Sia a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And yesterday somebody referred to us as Chief Sia, and it was so funny because I've never referred to myself as that. But Chief Sia is the person, as a dreamer, a storyteller, the creatives. So it's like, of course I would sit there, but I don't know why I didn't perceive myself. And they described us as leaders in that area. And I was like, wow. And I was telling Lauren, I'm like, I've never thought to describe myself in that way, but it actually really applies. And we change our food chief every day from every moment to every room we walk into. At home, we might be, you know, our father for sure at home is Chief Speedlum. Like growing up, we were just raised by our father and our grandmothers. And his heart is just so beautiful. He's so sensitive as a man, and he taught us so much about the gentleness of nurturing. And but he's also like a blue collar man who is, you know, a boss at his work. So I know he goes to work, and then people would tell us from his work, because it's kind of like one of those workplaces where the whole res works. So people would tell us all the time, like, "Oh, your dad is so strict at work." Like, well, he's strict with us too, but like to another level at work. They're like, and he swears. Like, he swears. Like, I've never heard him swear in my life. He would never around us girls. And so, you know, just like seeing how different we can be in every area, right? We can be someone different to every single situation we come across. So it's really important to this is why we self-locate for everything. So when we come to this training, we self-locate as mothers. We self-locate as women who are carrying forward the teachings of our time, so that we can bring kinship and alignment to all of us, and we can nurture everybody's hearts throughout this. And so it's really important that we acknowledge the strength that we sit in. And that's what we really love about the Okanagan system is that it supports us in our strength. It tells us that we don't need to know everything. We do not need to be the knowers of all. And that's why little Coyote is here and in the corner of this, because it's in the screen. We didn't put eyes on him. We always put different eyes on him. But he is, like we shared in the beginning of the training. So for folks who are just joining, Coyote is always in the room with us. He is always everywhere we are. He is ready and waiting to cause chaos in our lives. But also he's the transformer. He's the teacher. He teaches us important things that we need to know. He's very funny, very self-centered, very egotistical. We always laugh because in all of our stories, he thinks he's the most best looking animal people. And he always tries to make himself really important. And so he's a depiction of the human ego. And so Coyote's always in there. Sometimes we are Coyote. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, we all walk with Coyote every day. There's moments throughout all of our days where we're having Coyote thoughts. And this is how we remove shame from that ego, right? And we can be able to elevate our mindset when we understand that those thoughts are Coyote whispers. Sometimes Coyote's whispering something in our ear and we're like, oh, he's either trying to distract me or he's trying to put things in my head to make me feel like I'm most important in a situation. So it's a humbling of ourselves, a reminder. And so Coyote's always going to be there to try to, like, not trip you up, but try and test your self-discipline in all of these areas. So we got to always rise above that mindset. So when we choose where we're sitting, we choose from our strength because we know that we're important to the people within our strength. We never, ever look at ourselves or our own people or anybody from a deficit mindset. We only look through the strength and the gift of what they bring to the people. Because creation made no mistakes in bringing every single one of us here. It's not possible. If you have breath in you, then there's no mistake of you being here at all. That we all come here with a purpose and a gift. And once we align ourselves with our gifts, we can bring something so powerful to the world, something that the world needs, bring something so important to the collective and to the feast, we would say. And so it's really important to remember that when we're looking at these. And so not feeling like you have to be everything. When we look at the 4 food chief system, you'll see here that we're in a circle. This was the beautiful conceptualization that Lauren created about the data points. And like, okay, so the word in Alkanwi is a droplet. It's the imagery of a droplet dropping into the top of your head and slowly absorbing throughout your body. And every single one of the drops that goes into your head is the lived experience and the story of another human being that you're coming into kinship with or connection with. Can you let that cat? Oh, never mind. Sorry, my cats are just on now that the kids are gone. So when we look at it, we understand that every person's story adds to us, adds to our knowledge and to our being. And so it's really important that we show up with our story again, which is why we shared our self-location at the beginning and why we ask everybody to self-locate before writing a story. So who are you in alignment to this? What strengthens your understanding of this story? If you cannot find any connection to the story at all, we say it's also a beautiful thing to give that story up and maybe offer it to somebody who can find something, somewhat of a connection within it, because that does strengthen the medicine of a story. And so the beautiful thing is, so for instance, me choosing Chief Speetlum for Aranalkanwi, my polar is then Chief and chap-teek. So these balance each other out. They come to a neutrality. And it is necessary that we listen to our polars. Our polars balance our viewpoints. And so when you look at the characteristics of Chief and chap-teek, the fathers group, they're very logical, they're very protective, they're very action oriented, they're very driven to just get where they need to go. You think of the life of a salmon. They're like, I need to get where I need to get, and here's my plan to get there. And like, let's all go. And then you think of the life of a Speetlum, of a Chief Speetlum, and how she's grounded. She's in the ground. She senses and knows the movements of the land. She knows about the kinships that are happening. Her heart is very central to her life. Again, there's no way for a Speetlum to regenerate other than taking its heart out and replanting. It needs human hands. So it needs human connection to be able to even regenerate itself. And that's because we have Speetlum today, we know that our ancestors did that because they loved us. And so you're thinking of all that generational love that brings things. And what does that do though? That slows down Chief and chap-teek, that slows down the salmon. They're like, no, we don't have time to think about everybody, let's go. And they're so necessary to each other. They need to balance and come to a neutral understanding. It's never about everyone being in this like harmonious love and like da-da-da. Like it's very like, it's not kittens and rainbows. It's very much, we find neutral ground. We find what works best for the collective and we go with that. So sometimes it is that Chief Speetlum needs to inform Chief and chap-teek, like, okay, we need to slow down the process because we're forgetting like 100 salmon over here. They're like we've left them in the dust. We need to bring them forward. And then Chief and chap-teek will say, well, we're on a schedule. We need to get to where we need to get to. But then there needs to be some understandings made, shared understandings. And so they have a conversation back and forth, and then they come to a neutral understanding where he'll say, okay, let's slow down for a day. Let's let them catch up. And then we all go together. But there's always going to be that back and forth neutrality. Go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry. But, so when I always think about the 4 food chiefs and kind of this system, the thing that always pops into my mind on just kind of how to show how this can actually play out in the real world was during COVID. And so when we kind of think of everything was our 9 to 5, we show up at the office, there was that's just how you did it. And then everybody that tried to come in and say, well, why don't we do it different? It's like, well, this is the way we've always done it. So that's how it's gonna happen. Like, don't change what's not broken type thing, even though the system itself was becoming broken or was built in that fashion. And so not that that's wrong in the sense that, but that's just more of like an energy that is a reflection of Chief Skin Peace, just always the things that have always happened and always done. And when COVID happened, everything was disrupted. The whole world went quiet. We all had to sit there and figure out, well, how do we keep up these things that need to be done? How does the work keep happening if we can no longer do everything the way that we used to do it? And so we kind of reached a point of a crisis where we had to all come together and understand, how do we all make this work together? And that's where Chief syilx comes in. Chief syilx is like, okay, well, even the fact that we're all sitting on Zoom together today from all over the place is something that wasn't really as big as it is now. Now it's just common practice. Working from home became a big thing. Different, like the education even within universities has even today still been very accommodating for those that can't maybe even leave their communities to go to school, especially with the cost of living. And then we look at, okay, well, how do we take care of everybody? How do we make sure that those that are in retirement homes are taken care of? All the kids that now no longer can go to school, how are we going to take care of them, and take care of the hearts of the people? And I remember one of the gentlemen in our community, he ended up putting on virtual live like Saturday night DJ nights. He's a DJ, the same as DJ. And so he would put on these big DJ nights on Facebook, and there would be all of our aunties in there. Everyone's at home, like sharing screen and dancing. Like amazing. And so we all kind of found our connection and found our place within that time, even from the being so siloed within our homes. And that was very Chief Speakwam energy, because I'm always making sure all the people are taken care of. And of course, as again, this is like a neutral system. So it's not that it's going to go without flaws. It's not that it's going to go without certain things that we need to consider that might not be considered. And then there's a time where we're like, okay, we have to actually put this into action. We have to make sure these things actually get done. We need someone who's going to be able to apply this to this very new world that we're all walking into and living in. And that's Chief and chap-teek. And Chief and chap-teek was the one that kind of took that and ran with it or swam with it. And we always had to make sure we considered every single person, though. Those that worked in the grocery stores that still needed to go to work, we had to make sure we included every single person, and that is the energy of the fly. And so there's all these different aspects of when it all happened, and bring us forward to today. We think, well, we don't need to live in that place anymore. There were still things about the way that we were before that worked. So let's bring that back. So we kind of brought back what worked from previous, and then kind of kept moving forward. And the world looks so different now from before this all happened, but it also doesn't look the same as it did in 2020 when it initially started. So it's just kind of finding those systems and bringing in what works, what doesn't, really removing our ego on how things get done, because again, fortunately, we don't need to know everything. And me and Kelsie often will have to rely on people that are coming from a different food chief.
Anyone?
So those chief and chap-teeks of the world, me and Kelsie are begging for all the time. And like we really feel their absence. And our work can reflect it sometimes. And so with that, it is one of those things where you really learn to appreciate the differences, even when you butt heads. Our brother-in-law, I call him like my favorite wet blanket, because he's so in TT, and I'll come with my big dreams and ideas, and then he will kind of like be the wet blanket on me and be like, okay, but you have to think about this. You got to think about this. How are you going to ground that? What about this? And I'm like, okay, it was an idea. Calm down. But also at the same time, there's been times where he had me reflecting on these things that I need to consider. And I was actually able to make it tangible and make it happen because of that, because he brought in a whole other perspective that I didn't consider. And it's when you really learn to appreciate, even though sometimes it's frustrating.
Yes. That part. So this is all the 4 food chiefs. Feel free to screen grab or to take a photo of it if you want, but these are sort of the characteristics of each one. We always call this the original personality test. And it's so good when you know who you are when you walk into any situation, because then you know who to search for. So who's your polar, right? You got to search for your polar right away. So again, Lauren and I are always looking for NTT because we are just not action. They're very methodical, which we are not. So as you can see in our morning rush this morning and getting distracted by a lot of children. So always searching for your polar, always searching for the person. And it's so funny because Western society teaches us that if somebody doesn't align with exactly what we're saying, that they're in conflict with us. And that's often not what it is. It's not a conflict. It's not even an imbalance. It's that there isn't neutrality and understanding. It's that you're not willing to open up your mind enough to just at least hear what they're trying to provide to you. That doesn't go to say that there are not jerks out there, because there are. And those are just coyotes, you know. Sometimes coyote people come into our lives for a reason, to test our knowledge, to test our values, to test us in some way. And we always have to work with that. So yeah, so Skimhe's, again, been around the longest, considered the most stable in stance, representing dependability, stableness, wisdom, patience, the keeper of the old ways and the teachings. So they represent our elders group. In-kum-up-ah-lux, again, the fathers, action-oriented. They promote positive application of processes. They allow the forward movement of the whole. They find ways forward, and they break through barriers that present themselves. I want to acknowledge my good friend Eden in the crowd. She is somebody to me who is an in-kum-up-ah-lux in the work that she does, breaking barriers and just moving mountains for people. And so, you know, I always like really look to her for that, because again, that's something I don't possess in any type of way anywhere. And then Chief syilx represents an anchor of the heart. They provide medicine to the people through nurturing kinships. They remember the power of inclusivity and remind others to not take someone's voice away. Again, they're the ones that are always looking for fly, always watching out for where fly is, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, and thinking about the love that it takes for our people to continue. And then Chief syilx represents change, innovation, and likes to shake up the environment around them, providing beauty to the space that they occupy. They're the creatives, the dreamers, the storytellers, and the artists, and they think of new ways to do things. I really love this group because we have a lot of syilx people in our community, and it's so interesting to see them weigh in on issues that we're facing in our community. And they'll be like, oh, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? And they're such brilliant ideas. And so really listening to the creatives when they have creative problem solving and they have a way to deal with something. It's not this system, because this is our governance system for our nation, our actual syilx homeland governance system. You can see how this system would conflict with our Indian Act Chief and Council system, which makes only a select few the guiders and rulers of what happens in our community. And not that they see themselves that way. I don't want to put that on them, because we know our Chief and Council are there in spite of the system, not to serve it. And so we know that it's kind of a necessary evil of a role. We have to manage the Indian Act somehow. And so I have respect for them, but this system would definitely conflict with that. And we know that Indian agents and colonizers knew that, you know, this is the easiest way to disrupt their governance system and make them think that this system is, you know, their real system. Because I didn't know about the 4 food chiefs. We knew about them through chap-teek, but we didn't know the system and how it, like the story that holds it, the chap-teek that holds it, until we were older. And so it's a beautiful thing to revive our governance and to use it to do the work that we need to do. Were you going to say something?
No, I'm okay. Feeling good to go.
Okay. And so I just pulled this up as was an example. We went to Sitka, Alaska, this past fall. And we got to sit with some Indigenous journalists there. And it was such a great time. And we did this training, and then we thought, okay, let's do like a little bit of a small version of an in-kum-up-ah-lux. Let's talk about journalism and media. And so we made up this story that, you know, because like when Cool and Shootin called the animal people together, he said, the people to be are coming, this is their issues. They have no survival skills. You need to help them. And so for the story that we created for this in-kum-up-ah-lux, again, back to Eden, we always say, burn it all down. Create something new that works. We decided, okay, like this in our story, journalism has been burnt down. Like there's no media. We have to come back and recreate it and re-envision it as something beautiful for our people. How would we do that? So the question that brought the in-kum-up-ah-lux into formation was, after the fire, we need to reimagine a world where journalism will serve the people. What can we offer? And so in our round 1, so you choose your 4 food chief that you're going to sit under from your strength. So if you're like, okay, I can speak to policy, I can speak to action, I can speak to how we're going to get from A to B, then you would sit, with Chief and Teek with the salmon people. Or you're like, oh, actually, I have some really creative thoughts around this. I have like some stories that will help guide us forward. You would sit with Chief Sia, the youth Saskatoon people. Or you would sit with Chief Skim East if you wanted to talk about the old ways, if you wanted to remind people of the teachings, if you're like, okay, but we got to remember this is our protocol, and bringing them forward through the bear people. And then a Chief Speetlum is, okay, how will we nurture their hearts? How will we take care of them? So we all chose our 4 food chief to sit within, and we walked away for round 1 together. And each food chief group sat together and defined the problem. That's the first round of any Inalkanui. You define the issue. So you lay out what was the problem with the old system? What were the things that were not serving us? So we all defined it from the perspective of our food chief group. And then we came back together and we share out, each food chief group shares how we defined the problem collectively. Then we go back for round 2 and we all discussed, okay, what are some solutions mindful of our polar? So in our first round, when I'm in Speetlum, I ask my Speetlum group, listen to our polar very closely, listen to in-kum-up-ah-lux very closely, because how they define the problem is how we need to neutralize how they defined it, and they need to neutralize how we define it. And so we need to really hold our polar as medicine to us. And so in our round 2, when we come up with solutions, we have to be mindful of what in-kum-up-ah-lux shared as the problem. For them, it might be like, well, there was all these old policies that are still living and still in place that tell us that we have to follow like the Canadian press standards. That's a very in-kum-up-ah-lux thought. And then Chief Speetlum is like, yes. And so we'll take that thought and we'll transform it and say, okay, we need to create our own Indigenous standards. We need to create our own thing, which we do have like some of those standards set in place, but we need to have it respected across all people, not just with Indigenous people or stories, but across all. So how do we create this and how do we do it together? So we're balancing each other out while listening. And then we come back and we share those out. And then round 3, we go back into our groups for round 3 and we collaborate and we come back. We hear all of the solutions. We go back and we collaborate and we share the solutions to create common understanding. And so we hear what they say as their solution and we add to it, or we support how that's going to happen. So if in-kum-up-ah-lux says we got to do away with this policy, it is not helpful for us, it's never going to allow us to move forward, then Chief Speetlum group would say, here's how we're going to help with that policy. Here's what we're going to pour into it to neutralize you. And then we come back for round 4 and everyone speaks out their commitments as a collective and their personal commitment. So I really love this round. It's always my favorite round of an Inalkanui, to hear how people are going to be walking away from it. Because the responsibility doesn't end at the Inalkanui. It is a responsibility you take up because you were part of the process. So because every single person has the voice in the process, every single person then informed the solution together. And that people think that that's insane and that can't happen. We have had so many Inalkanui where we have solved huge things, like huge questions in 2 hours, because these flow so well, because no one's in a debate. No one's trying to prove points. That's ego. That's coyote again, coming in to disrupt the process. We put that away. We don't even think about that. We don't think like, oh, that person I don't like is sitting over there. No, we come with neutral understanding. And with every single one of us united in the heart that we're doing this for the best of the collective. And that we are the collective, so we're informing it. And so the process itself is just such a beautiful way to work through anything. And we're gonna use this process to inform you on how to do a story by framing it and by putting on sort of the hat of every food chief as you work through a story.
So then this is like a series that I'm currently working on. It's called like the Working Together series. It's showing all the 4 food chiefs and how they're all working together. So here's some examples. I haven't had a chance to finish it. So Chief Speetlum and Chief in-kum-up-ah-lux working together. So you'll see on the board, Chief Speedlam has all the food, all the animal people. So graphic. All the animal people, and she's making sure that while in-kum-up-ah-lux is building, that in-kum-up-ah-lux is considering all the animal people and making sure that they can all fit in there and they're all taken care of. And then in her hand, you can even see that she's holding the fly, and she's about to paste the fly on there to say, don't forget fly. Fly needs to be able to fit too, no matter how small. And so Chief in-kum-up-ah-lux is taking that, like considering everything, making sure that the building is going to be up to that code. He's even got his little hammer and his little pencil. He's ready to build. And yeah, so it's just like kind of an example on how that dynamic works together and how the influence and finding that neutrality actually does take care of all the people. And then there's Chief Skimheast and Chief in-kum-up-ah-lux working together. So Chief Skimheast being the keeper of old ways, they're building a sweat lodge. So Chief Skimheast is making sure that Chief in-kum-up-ah-lux, while building, is including everything that needs to be included, that the medicine that's being poured into this is honoring the process and the ceremony of a sweat lodge. And I always notice that like it looks like Chief in-kum-up-ah-lux is just like getting bossed around all the time. all the other food chiefs. But it's because Chief in-kum-up-ah-lux is practical, logical. He can really big go-getter, and he knows how to take what they're saying and put it into a way where it works. And then, oh yeah, I'm trying to change this title. So then we have Chief Sia and Chief Speedlam. So Chief Speedlam is like, they're all moving camp. The story is that they're all moving up the river to build a new camp. And Chief Speedlam is doing the same thing. She's like, okay, well, we need to make sure that not only do we have all the animal people, but we need to make sure that we're also taking all of our things, because when we move camp, we always make sure that nobody even can walk onto this land and doesn't even think anyone lives here. So we need to make sure we take all of our belongings. And so you'll notice the little birch baskets with like all their clothes that they don't wear, all in there. And so Chief Speedlam went to Chief Sia and said, hey, how do we get everybody up the river? And Chief Sia's like, okay, well, we can build a raft. And of course, Chief Sia also having to do more problem solving. She had to take away or like detangle this big rope so she can build the raft. And the story behind the rope is that St. Clip wanted to build his eagle wings, which is one of our chap-teek. And when he fell and his eagle wings inevitably broke, and in that story he dies, but this rope was all tangled up. So Chief Sia now has to take out the tangles, problem solving there. And then she had to go and build this raft big enough for all the animal people and all their belongings. And then in the background, you'll see there's St. Clip, not Chief, but St. Clip. And he's coming because the animal people, although he causes some ruckus, he's always there and he's always welcome there. There's times where boundaries need to be set. There's times where different things need to be considered about his presence and how he comes to these places, but we never do forget St. Clip. St. Clip does serve a purpose in the sense that human ego that we have, there's times where it's necessary, and it really has a big thing to do with our physical survival, just as humans, at a very basic human level. And St. Clip will protect that. And sometimes will be an overcorrection, but he does correct it. And then there's this little, hold on, zoom on his little basket. This is like a little thing you'll notice later on, I'll point it out, but in his little basket, you'll see that there's a little fox costume. So that comes into play later.
We don't have time for questions right now. But we will go on a bit of a break, and then we'll come back for the trauma-informed anti-oppressive tools and teachings. But if you do have questions, not to shut you down, but please just drop them in the chat. Maybe if you think of anything over the break. It's 8:30 our time, which makes it 10:30